Hey everybody, Mike here, and with the release of Transformers The Last Night happening later tonight in many places, I thought what would be a better time than to go back and look at the previous 4 Transformers movies and rank them from the worst to the best, because we know that the Transformers movies all have their faults, and even though I'm a big fan of them, one of them is the worst and one of them is the best. So we're going to look back at the previous 4 movies and rank them 4, 3, 2, and 1. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with number 4, which I consider to be the worst of the 4 Transformers movies to this point. And that movie is Transformers Age of Extinction. Now, Transformers Age of Extinction is really weird because when I first saw it in the theaters, I thought, wow, this is a really good movie. This might be my favorite Transformers movie. But then, the more times I watched it, the more times I saw problems with it. Like, a lot of problems. And it really makes me think that the previous trilogy is miles better than what we got in Transformers Age of Extinction. So to start off, the first half is actually pretty good. Everything that has to do with Texas and Optimus Prime being in hiding, the Autobots being in hiding, and the car chase even, and just the small town Texas feel, all of that was actually pretty good, and I still enjoy watching that half, or not even a half, it's more of a quarter actually. I really enjoy watching that first quarter. So the problem starts to happen toward the second half. It gets a little messy. This movie just starts throwing everything your way, and it starts losing its main focus here. That small town feel just turns into another giant, crazy action movie, and it gets a little ridiculous. The good points is that this movie has a lot better characterization for the Transformers. The Transformers do have their own types of attitudes and personalities, and it really comes forward in the movie. This movie also has one of the better villains of the 4 Transformers movies. Lockdown is a pretty good threat, and he is a pretty good character on his own as well. Now, another one of the problems that this movie has is it seems to be put together in a kind of lazy manner. This movie just doesn't hold up as much as the previous trilogy does as far as CGI and editing and overall quality of the film. If you look at this in a 4K TV, even though it's not on a 4K Blu-ray yet, you can really see some problems with the picture quality. Like, it's pretty noticeable than compared to the previous trilogy. And then the CGI was made by a branch of ILM, and it really shows because the CGI looks the worst of the 4 movies. So that's a lot of problems that it has with it. Just has to do with it just doesn't really live up to what came before it, in my opinion. And that's coupled with the fact that this is a really, really long movie that just doesn't have enough substance. It's really long, but there's really nothing happening except for mindless action. And over time, while that's really cool at first, once you have a 10-minute sequence of a giant magnet ship picking up metal all over Hong Kong, it gets a little boring. So that is why Transformers Age of Extinction is my least favorite of the 4 movies. Now, do I enjoy watching this? I do for a little while, like I said, with that first half, and then it just kind of starts to turn into, I'd rather watch the first Transformers movie, the second Transformers movie, or Transformers Dark of the Moon. It just doesn't live up to those 3. Now, for my number 3, which is the second worst or the third best, whichever you want to put it, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen. Now, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen is a movie that I saw without being a Transformers fan yet. I went to the first day that it was in theaters, but I wasn't really a fan, and I came out of that movie thinking like, oh, it was okay. It was nothing special. Now, in repeat viewings, this movie's very watchable. I can watch Transformers Revenge of the Fallen way more than I can with Transformers Age of Extinction. And that's just because I think it has more of a fun and adventurous tone throughout. You're just kind of on this adventure with Sam Witwicky and the Autobots, and you're trying to find this artifact. And that kind of takes you on a bit of a ride. Now, it does falter with the humor. This movie is riddled with stupid juvenile humor, and that is something that Michael Bay improved on with Transformers Dark of the Moon, the next movie in the trilogy. But this movie really had the problems with the humor. It was just so juvenile. Now, to go along with that, you have the twins in this movie, and the twins, maybe in small doses, they would be some funny characters, but since the twins are featured pretty much throughout this whole movie, they get a little old. It's kind of like having a movie about the twins almost, kind of like you don't want to watch a movie about the Minions, you want to see the Minions featured to the side in Despicable Me. You don't want to see a movie about Mater from Cars, but you maybe want to see some little bit of Mater sprinkled throughout a Lightning McQueen movie. That's how the twins should be, and they were just used too much in the movie. Now, what this movie does have going for it is the forest battle, which I think is by far the best battle that we have had in any of the 4 movies to this point. And that right there just makes this one so much more rewatchable, is because I really love watching that fight scene. Now, overall, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen is a decent movie, and like I said, I can watch it again and again, and that's the most important thing. But now moving on to number 2, we have Transformers Dark of the Moon. Transformers Dark of the Moon came after all the juvenile humor that we saw in Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, and Michael Bay really toned it down. I mean, we had some stuff in there that kind of seemed out of place. One of them that really sticks out is the part where Sam's in his office, and this lady that works there is like, has this really tight clothing and definitely not something that you should be wearing to work, and the guy that works there is like, hey, that's a Latin meltdown right there, don't have a Latin meltdown in my office. It's very weird. I always thought, how did that make the final cut of the movie? But other than that, this movie has a really dark tone, which really contrasts to what we've had in any of the other movies. Now, dark tone doesn't always mean better, but for this movie it really worked. Because of the whole thing with the Chicago battle, it really showed that, like, hey, this is a serious thing that Chicago got destroyed, and the tone really worked with what was presented in the film. The movie also had more of a coherent plot than we saw in Revenge of the Fallen and Transformers Age of Extinction, and it had one of the probably the best opening that we've had in a Transformers movie. The whole sequence with the moon landing and finding Sentinel Prime, well, they actually didn't find Sentinel Prime, but he was in the Ark, I should say finding the Ark. That whole sequence, and then coming back to Earth with the astronauts and everything, I just really love that sequence. And I remember when I saw that in the theater for the first time, I was like, man, this is going to be a good Transformers movie. And it was, and that's why Transformers Dark of the Moon is my second favorite of the 4 films, and I really enjoy watching it. Now, it starts out rather slow, and the action doesn't build up until we get to the second half, or pretty much the third act of the movie. We get a little bit of action sprinkled in with, like, the highway chase and the Mexican standoff with Sideswipe, Ironhide, and the Dreads, but the main action comes toward the end. And unlike Age of Extinction, this action doesn't seem to go on forever because it has a point. When Lockdown is trying to hunt down Optimus Prime, it does have a point in a sense, but it feels like, oh, well, they're gonna fight anyway, so why is Lockdown wasting his time like this? Now, when we have, like, the building and driller sequence, Sam and the rest of them are trying to take down this control pillar. It feels like we're moving toward the conclusion of this movie because they're trying to actually do something, and that's why, even though Transformers Dark of the Moon has a little bit of a stretched out final battle, it works, and it doesn't feel like it's, oh, when is this thing gonna end, because it's a little more entertaining and it feels like it's going somewhere. Now, an interesting problem that I find with this movie is the forced inclusion of Carly. Now, since the whole Megan Fox thing happened, Michaela had to be removed from the film, but I think instead of trying to force Carly into a role that seemed to be kind of meant for Michaela, I think they should have just taken the girlfriend role out of it, looking back on the situation. I might have thought that, oh, maybe bringing Carly was a good idea at the time, but looking back on it, I think it could have benefited a little bit without the inclusion of Carly. And just kind of have Sam single. And then it also could have left open the future of maybe even bringing Megan Fox back and rekindling that relationship a little bit and have a little bit more continuity, because bringing in Carly just, like, suddenly by, like, showing her butt in the first, like, couple minutes of the movie, it was like, What? If you didn't know about Megan Fox like having a fallout with Steven Spielberg and or Michael Bay or whatever that nonsense was, you'd be like, what the heck is going on here? Because she's not even really introduced. It's like, oh hey, she's living with Sam, that's it. And it's like it was written for Michaela, because it most likely probably was written for Michaela. So that's a big problem that I have with Transformers Dark of the Moon. But otherwise, second favorite film, really love it. Now, my favorite film, my number one Transformers film, has got to go to the original Transformers from 2007. This is the movie that kicked off the Transformers franchise, and it was just so it had like some sort of magic in it. It had one of the greatest scenes with the arrival to Earth, with that beautiful music by Steve Jablonsky, and this was just a really well put together film, and Michael Bay's, I think, best attempt at doing a Transformers movie. Now that being said, there are not a lot of Transformers in this movie compared to some of the ones that have come after it, some of the other sequels. This movie does not feature Optimus Prime until like an hour into the movie, and he's actually not in it that much. Megatron is not in the movie that much. Starscream only has a couple of lines. But this movie is more based on a progressive origin story of the Transformers being on Earth, and that's why this works. It's a simple plot. They want the cube, they want the glasses, and they're going to go find the cube and the glasses, and they have a battle for them at the end. And that makes perfect sense, and it's simple enough, and it doesn't get all crazy plot-like like the sequels tend to get into. So this movie, it's good. It has good action. It was a big step for CGI at the time. It had great CGI, which even is better than what we saw 7 years later with Transformers Age of Extinction. And it was also a really fun movie. It had fun moments. It had some awkward humor in there. You all know what scene I'm talking about. And it's the one where you go and get up and say like, oh, I'm going to go grab a snack.
Were you masturbating?
But this movie was really good, it was really fun, and that is why it is my favorite Transformers movie. It's just because it is a simple, fun plot with great action, and it's just fun to watch. I know I keep saying fun a lot, but this is a very fun movie, and that is what this franchise is as a whole. It's a fun franchise. It's not meant to win any Oscars. Now, would I be opposed to some critics liking Transformers The Last Night? I would not be opposed to that. I would actually really love that, because I don't like the bad vibe that is going around Transformers with the people who watch movies. So that is my ranking of the first 4 Transformers movies leading up to the release of Transformers The Last Night. I really hope it's a good movie. Can't wait to watch it. Hope you guys like it too. And make sure to leave the hashtag TF95 when you take a picture of yourself seeing the movie, and you can be featured on a future video. And make sure to follow me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And until next time, I'm Mike. See you guys.